There's one aspect of shooting technique that's just as important for hunters and competition shooters to learn. In fact, everybody should learn it, and that is correct trigger technique. Think about this for a second. This trigger translates everything you've ever learned about shooting into each shot. It's a connection between you and what you know, so it's very important to get it right. Before you can use one properly, the thing has to fit you, which means the gun has to fit you. You can do a quick check, if you're thinking of buying a rifle, by slipping the rifle into the crook of your elbow. Okay, you just slip it into the crook of the elbow like that, and see if the finger lands naturally with the front pad on the trigger blade. If it doesn't, you may have to shorten or lengthen it, which is not too bad a job. I've always had to have this done because I'm 6 feet 4 inches tall, but you do it by adding pieces at the spacer here or taking them away. Can be a homebrewed job, or it can be a job for an expert. Either way, it's not too bad. Important thing to know is it must be done. It really must be done to get the most out of the trigger. The way the trigger is used affects the whole performance of the rifle. Now, little word about adjustable triggers. Most of them are these days. Most triggers are 2-stage adjustable. Because it's got an adjustment mechanism on it, doesn't mean you have to keep using it. Okay, if your trigger suits you the way it is, leave it. Don't mess and twiddle with it just because there are things there that you can poke a screwdriver into or an Allen key. All right. The other thing is hair triggers. Match shooters, competition shooters can control a hair trigger, which is one that breaks at the slightest touch. They can control that no problem at all. But for general shooting, for rough shooting, hunting, you do not need a hair trigger. You don't need a very light trigger setting. In fact, I would say it's a liability, because you're going to be out there in the snow, in the wind and the rain, and these things will go cold and they'll be like chipolatas one morning and you won't have the control. Then a very light trigger will break, it'll go before you're used to it and before you can predict it, and it can be dangerous and it's certainly inefficient. Have it set at a practical load, not so that it'll just go off as soon as you touch the thing. All right? Now, let's get into actually pulling a trigger. And before we pull a trigger, get rid of the word pull. We don't pull triggers, we squeeze them or we even press them, but we don't pull them, okay? Now, I'm going to do this mute. The rifle isn't loaded. I don't want a loaded gun to demonstrate with while I'm poking around at a trigger. But I'll tell you when the rifle fires and I'll talk you through the phases of it all, okay? Now, with the rifle up, on aim, just touch the trigger. Lay your finger alongside it, refine the aim slightly, get your finger in position on the blade and take up the first pressure. Refine the aim until you're ready to fire, and then release the gun. The gun is now fired, but the important thing is stay on aim. Stay on aim with your eye behind the scope or the sights until that pellet lands. Now that's called follow through. Everybody who wants to do something efficiently in sport, be it shooting, golf, snooker, cricket, whatever, they all use follow through. That ensures a smooth technique, and for you it keeps the rifle still while the pellet's inside it. If you don't use proper follow through and you stick your head up as soon as you've pulled the trigger, then you're going to jerk the gun ultimately and you're going to throw everything offline. Develop that follow through, practice that sequence, and have respect for the trigger. Develop the proper use of it and you'll be a better shooter, I promise.